Waiting for what never came. Chapter 1. Andrew Stone was the richest man in the world, and he was known for being obsessed with his work. Emily Jameson had been married to him for 5 years now. It was impossible to count how many times he'd neglected her in the name of work. The first time he did was on her birthday. She'd gone through the trouble of planning a celebration and reserving a restaurant for them. But in the end, he went abroad for a business acquisition, disregarding the fact that she'd waited all day and night for him. The second time was after her car accident. When she was on the brink of death, she needed a family member to sign her hospital consent form. She used the last bit of her strength to text him, but she only ended up receiving an indifferent reply. "I'm in the middle of an important meeting. Deal with it yourself." The third time was when her father was dying. He'd held on to his final breath, wanting to see Andrew one last time, but Andrew never came. He was too busy with a signing ceremony for a multi-billion-dollar contract. Emily had held her father's gradually cooling hand as she listened to the constant ringing of the call going unanswered, her heart turning completely numb. After experiencing this time and time again, she finally realized that in Andrew's heart, nothing and no one could ever compare to his business empire. Emily told herself this was the price of a marriage of convenience, arranged by her family. He said from the start that he wouldn't love her, but at least this meant he wouldn't love anyone else either. However, after she'd almost fully grown accustomed to the crushing despair of a loveless marriage, a shocking piece of news exploded among their social circle. Andrew Stone, the man said to be a zealous workaholic and uninterested in women, did in fact keep a young woman by his side, and he doted on her most outrageously. Rumor had it that he'd abandoned the contract signing of a multi-billion-dollar project just to take her skiing, that he'd canceled every meeting for an entire week just to nurse a sick kitten with her, that he'd even let her doodle all over his valuable contracts. Once, he'd supposedly halted the meeting with one of the company's longest business partners just because she said it was boring. When Emily first heard of it, she thought it had to be nonsense. How could any of it be impossible? This was Andrew they were talking about, the man who valued his time above all else and was rational even to the point of cruelty. Driven by something she couldn't explain, Emily used every connection and resource at her disposal to look into that young woman rumored to be Andrew's mistress. Unfortunately, Andrew was extremely protective of her. Even after spending a ton of money and effort, all Emily managed to get was a blurry side profile of the young woman. She looked young and delicate as Andrew held her closely in his arms. It was a gentle, protective move that Emily had never been on the receiving end of throughout their 5-year marriage. That very afternoon, after receiving the photo, Emily left the house in a daze. As she stepped onto the sidewalk, a black Rolls-Royce seemed to swerve out of control and came barreling at her. She didn't even get to have a good look at the driver before the impact sent her body flying, and she slammed heavily onto the ground. The pain engulfed her, and all went black. When she woke again, it was to the harsh sting of hospital disinfectant. What came into view was the look of pure professionalism on the face of Andrew's chief secretary, Tyler Moore. "You're awake, Mrs. Stone," Tyler said flatly. "Mr. Stone asked me to deliver a message from him." Do not try looking into people you shouldn't, otherwise, it won't just be an accident next time. Emily's eyes flew wide open. The pain in her heart nearly made her stop breathing. It was him. He did this. Just because she'd found a single photo of that young woman, he'd gone so far as to orchestrate a car crash just to threaten her. The overwhelming sense of shock and pain drowned her like a tidal wave. Andrew, the man she'd loved for years, the one she thought only cared for his work, had turned out to be capable of something so cruel and insane, all for another woman. Though she didn't want to believe it, she was forced to anyway. Emily thought she'd never be able to know what that young woman really looked like. However, a week later, she received the most unexpected call from the police station. "Is this a family member of Mr. Stone? Someone has filed a police report accusing Mr. Stone of solicitation. We need to trouble you to come down to the police station." Emily's mind went blank. Solicitation? Andrew? Almost mechanically, she rushed to the police station and immediately saw a young woman, Lucy Evans, all dolled up. She was sitting cross-legged on a chair, her pretty face scrunched up in displeasure. "Why haven't you guys told him to come down here? Didn't you hear me? I want him charged with solicitation." "Are you too scared to arrest him just because he's the richest man in the world?" The surrounding officers exchanged awkward looks as they sweated profusely and tried to explain. "Miss, could there be some kind of misunderstanding? Mr. Stone." "What misunderstanding?" Lucy snapped as she stomped her feet in anger. "If you won't arrest him, I'll just go to another police station and file my report there." The moment she finished speaking, the sharp screech of skidding tires could be heard outside. A black sedan had come to a hurried stop, and moments later, Andrew strode in wearing a perfectly tailored black suit. His handsome face and commanding presence instantly silenced everyone in the station lobby. As soon as he came in, he spotted Emily and frowned. "What are you doing here?" he questioned icily. Throat constricted, Emily responded hoarsely. "The police called me." Andrew's expression turned even colder as he instructed imposingly. "You're not needed here anymore. Go back." And without sparing her another glance, he walked straight toward Lucy. What happened next made Emily feel her blood stop flowing. Andrew, that proud, untouchable man, actually crouched down in front of Lucy and looked up at her. There was a tenderness in his voice that Emily had never heard before as he said to Lucy in a placating tone, "Who upset you this time, babe?" Lucy's eyes reddened. Pouting, she adamantly declared, "You did. You didn't reply to my message within 3 seconds, so I got mad and called the police to report you for solicitation." Everyone around them gasped at her outrageous reasoning, but Andrew didn't even get mad. Instead, he chuckled softly and stroked Lucy's face. His tone was unbelievably tolerant and indulgent as he said, "Yes, of course. It's all my fault. Since you reported me for solicitation so that the police will arrest me, I'll spend a few days in jail to make it up to you, okay?" He even stretched out his hands toward the nearest officer, gesturing for them to cuff him. The poor officer blanched in fear. Ian Hall, Andrew's assistant, hurriedly tried to explain, "You've misunderstood Mr. Stone, Ms. Evans. Mr. Stone got into an accident this morning. He injured his arm and was in the hospital the whole time. His phone died, so he couldn't reply to your message in time. Please don't be angry with him." Upon hearing that, Lucy grew anxious. She grabbed Andrew's arm, and sure enough, she saw the white bandage peeking out from under his sleeve. She burst into tears as she cried, "You're injured. Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Andrew gently wiped her tears away and said, "I promised to reply to your messages at once, no matter what happens. Since I failed to do it, it means I'd failed to keep my promise and deserve to be punished." Lucy wailed even harder as she threw herself into his arms. "Why are you always so good to me?" He held her close, his voice so gentle it could melt the coldest of hearts. "Because I love you, of course. Now tell me, babe, how do you want to punish me?" She laughed, and her eyes flickered briefly before she pointed at the floor and declared, "I want to ride you like a pony right here, right now." Ian's expression stiffened. He was just about to try and convince Lucy otherwise, but Andrew held his hand up to stop him. Looking at Lucy affectionately, Andrew asked, "Must it be here?" "That's right. I want to do it right here." "Okay," he readily replied. Right there in front of everyone, Andrew got on all fours and said gently, "Get on then." Lucy giggled and climbed onto his back with ease, like a spoiled princess. Andrew Stone, the king of the business world who dominated the global financial headlines and held the world's economy in his hands, was willingly crawling around the police station while carrying his princess on his back. There wasn't the slightest shred of impatience on his face, only his abundant adoration for her. The entire police station had gone quiet. No one dared to make a sound. Only Emily stood there with her hands clamped around her mouth as her tears poured down her face. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would never have believed for a second that Andrew, the heartless workaholic, was capable of such an act. Chapter 2. Memories of Andrew flooded Emily's mind, filling her with a suffocating sense of bitterness. Even before she married him, she'd heard a lot about him. The media praised Andrew with every superlative they could come up with, expounding his looks, his brilliance, and his business acumen. He was the perfect heir who, within a single year of taking over the family conglomerate, had driven Stone Group straight to the top of every company ranking. His only flaw was that he showed no interest in women. It was as if he were a robot who existed solely to work. But when Emily saw him at a banquet, one look was all it took. His poised, detached manner and elegant composure instantly swept her off her feet. From that moment on, her heart had no room for anyone else. So, when her family proposed the marriage of convenience between her and Andrew, she joyously agreed to it. Her friend had tried to advise her, saying, "Andrew might be great in every way, but he's an emotionless workaholic. You won't be happy if you marry him." Alas, Emily had naively believed that as long as she played her role well and loved him enough, she could one day melt his heart. But that was not what happened. On their wedding night, he'd completed his marital obligation as if it were a business transaction before coldly informing her, "I have no interest in romance. Marrying you was a business decision. As long as you know your place, I'll fulfill my duties as a husband and ensure you enjoy the lifelong privileges of being Mrs. Stone, but don't expect anything more than that." Thus, after marriage, no matter how many times Andrew neglected Emily for work, she had endured it all in silence. She told herself that even though he didn't love her, he didn't love anyone else either. That was enough. But now, Emily could no longer lie to herself, not after she'd witnessed the way Andrew cherished Lucy and cast aside all of his pride for her. He even said the words, "I love you" to Lucy, which she'd yearned for years to hear coming from his mouth. She realized that Andrew wasn't cold and uninterested in women. She simply wasn't the woman he loved. All of her patience and steadfast endurance had been nothing but a joke. Wiping away her tears, she turned and left the police station. Then she got her phone out and called a lawyer, Kyle Ziegler. "Mr. Ziegler, please help me draw up a divorce agreement." The next day, Emily arrived at Stone Group with the freshly printed divorce papers in hand. However, the receptionist told her, "Mr. Stone hasn't been coming to the office for quite some time now, Mrs. Stone." Emily felt like she'd been stabbed right in her heart. Andrew, the workaholic who'd lived in his office for an entire month just to complete a business project, hadn't been coming to the office for some time. Pushing through the ache in her chest, she asked, "Where is he now?" With a hesitant expression, the receptionist whispered, "He's attending the auction at Sullivan's with Ms. Evans." An auction, Emily recalled some of the gossip about him spending a fortune just to make a young woman smile. After taking a deep breath, she drove straight to the auction. Filled with scions and socialites, the auction hall smelled of perfume and champagne. Emily instantly spotted Andrew in the front row with the lively and cheerful Lucy by his side. The auctioneer was introducing the final piece of the auction, a blue diamond necklace said to have once belonged to an Enderian queen. Its starting price alone was already staggering, and the bids kept soaring as well. However, each time someone placed a bid on it, Andrew would raise his paddle without hesitation to one-up the bid. His movements were languid, but it was clear he was determined to get the necklace. In the end, with the most astronomical price, he managed to get the necklace for Lucy. She happily threw her arms around his neck and kissed him on the cheek. Emily, who stood nearby, felt her heart sting with a numbing pain at the sight. In all their years of marriage, Andrew had never once given her a single noteworthy gift. She'd always thought he just wasn't the romantic type, but it turned out that he simply didn't want to be romantic with her. Her fingers tightened around the divorce papers. She drew in a steadying breath and walked toward the two eye-catching figures that made her eyes sting. Andrew noticed her first. The faint smile on his lips vanished. Almost instinctively, he shifted to shield Lucy behind him as he asked, "What are you doing here?" His reflexive attempt to protect Lucy stabbed Emily right in the chest. Mustering all her strength to keep her composure, she handed him the papers. "I need your signature for this document." At that moment, a staff member of the auction approached, reminding Andrew to proceed with the payment for the auctioned item. "I'm busy. Whatever it is, we'll talk about it later," Andrew said curtly. Later. Emily didn't want there to be a later. She didn't want to wait for even a second longer. "It's a very important document." "It'll only need a few minutes of your time," she insisted, her voice just barely shaking. "Let's get a divorce, Andrew. As long as you sign the divorce papers, we can file them. Once the court issues the divorce decree, we will no longer have anything to do with each other. Since you have someone else you truly love, I'll step aside and you can set me free. Let's both find the people we're meant to be with without holding each other back." Emily said it all in one breath before steeling herself as she stood there and waited for Andrew's answer. But he simply frowned. After a while, he finally turned his head slightly toward her, and it became clear he hadn't caught what she said. "What did you say? I already told you I'm busy. Save it for later." And with that, he walked away with the staff member. Emily breathed in deeply. Andrew was always like this. Throughout their 5 years of marriage, he constantly ignored everything she said. She was just about to chase after him when Lucy abruptly came over and snatched the papers out of her hands. "You're that wife from Andrew's arranged marriage, right?" Lucy said, as she looked Emily from head to toe with a scornful expression. "Andrew gave me his full trust by teaching me to replicate his signature, allowing me to sign any document for him." Emily's heart twisted so tightly it hurt to breathe. He taught Lucy his signature and allowed her to sign any document on his behalf. Everyone in the industry knew how meticulous Andrew was. He insisted on personally reviewing and signing every important document. But now, as if to prove her point, Lucy grabbed a pen from her handbag, and without even reading the document, she flipped to the last page and signed it with a flourish. Chapter 3. All done. I've signed it, Lucy said, shoving the papers back into Emily's hands. Her tone carried both a hint of charity and a dash of warning as she continued. I heard from Andrew that you two only got married as a business arrangement. Since that's the case, you should know your place. In the future, if you need to get anything signed to buy some property or expensive jewelry, just bring it to me. I'll sign it. You shouldn't bother Andrew anymore. He doesn't want to see you either. Emily stared at the signature that was an exact replica of Andrew's and felt nothing but mockery. She opened her mouth, wanting to inform Lucy that this wasn't a real estate contract, but a divorce agreement, but all of a sudden, the shrill wail of a fire alarm split the air. Fire! Everyone get out! Someone screamed. The crowd instantly erupted into chaos. Panic surged through the hall as people shoved and stumbled over one another toward the exit. Emily and Lucy were both standing further inside the hall. As they were both slight in build, they were soon knocked to the floor by the panicked crowd. Ouch! Don't step on me! Countless feet kept trampling over them. Agonizing pain shot through Emily's body. She felt as if her bones had been crushed beneath everyone's souls. She tried desperately to push herself up to no avail. Andrew, save me, Andrew, Lucy cried in terror. Lulu, Andrew's agitated voice rang out. Emily saw him forcing his way back through the crowd, and for a fleeting moment, a foolish hope flickered weakly in her chest. But when he reached them, his eyes locked straight onto Lucy. Without hesitation, he bent down and scooped her into his arms, holding her protectively as he turned and ran for the exit. Through it all, he didn't so much as glance at Emily. Andrew! Andrew! Emily screamed with the last of her strength, but her voice was drowned out by the piercing shrieks and cries from all around her. Had he heard her? Perhaps he did, but he didn't even turn his head around. Just when Emily thought she would be trampled to death, that familiar figure reappeared. A fragile spark of hope ignited in her chest. He came back. He really came back for her, however. Even though Andrew shot over to Emily, he didn't even spare her a glance. He simply rushed to pick up a bracelet that had dropped beside her at some point. Clutching it tightly, he turned to leave again. Thank goodness you found it for me. Lucy's tearful but happy voice rang out from afar. That's my favorite bracelet. I would have cried my heart out if it got destroyed under some Despiron's feet. Andrew hurried back to her, his tone filled with relief and affection. Well, I couldn't let my baby cry, could I? I had to find it for you. You're the best, Lucy said before giving him a peck. So he'd only turned back to pick up a bracelet. In his heart, the wife he'd been married to for 5 years mattered even less than one of Lucy's bracelets. The crushing despair and heartbreak fell like a massive boulder, burying Emily completely. Her vision went dark, and she fainted. When Emily regained consciousness, she found herself lying on a chilly operating table. The harsh lights of the operating room burned her eyes. The doctor, who was busy setting up for surgery, exclaimed, "You're awake, Mrs. Stone. You have multiple contusions and a fractured rib, but the worst is the internal bleeding from abdominal trauma. We need to operate on you immediately." Just as the anesthesiologist approached to inject her with anesthesia, the door to the operating room flew open with a loud bang. Several bodyguards in black rushed in. Without saying a word, they yanked the IV line off Emily's hand and roughly hauled her off the operating table. "What are you doing? The patient needs emergency surgery," the doctor exclaimed in fear and anger as he tried to stop them. However, the bodyguards ignored him as they forcefully dragged the weak and bleeding Emily out of the operating room. "Let go! Where are you taking me?" Emily made a feeble attempt to fight back, her wounds hurting even more due to the exertion. No one answered her. She was dragged right to the VIP ward and roughly tossed onto the cold, hard floor. Chapter 4. When Emily raised her head, she saw Andrew sitting by the hospital bed, carefully feeding Lucy some water. Lucy only seemed to be a little shaken. She gotten a scratch or two, but her injuries were nothing serious. Meanwhile, even as Andrew looked at the bloodied and disheveled Emily, there wasn't the faintest flicker of emotion in his eyes, only cold indifference. "Lulu wants to have some gingerbread cookies. I remember that the ones you make taste the best. Go to the hospital kitchen and make some for her, he said icily. Emily could hardly believe her ears. He didn't care that she was covered in blood right now. Instead, he'd had his bodyguards yank her right off the operating table just because Lucy wanted to eat gingerbread cookies. All the years of bottled-up humiliation, hurt, and despair finally exploded out of her. She forced herself up to a sitting position and questioned him, her voice raw as it tore from her throat. Andrew. You've gone too far. Where were you when I was almost trampled to death at the auction? You only had eyes for her, and now you dragged me out of surgery, even though I'm seriously injured, all because of a single request from her. Just what have I been to you all these years? I'm your lawfully wedded wife. How can you treat me like this? Tears streaked down Emily's blood-stained face, her voice cracking as she cried out in fury and heartbreak. She looked utterly pitiful and pathetic. Even so, Andrew's expression didn't even budge, not even a twitch. It was Lucy, nestled in his arms, who covered her ears in disdain and complained with a pout. It's so noisy, Andrew. Her screaming is giving me a headache. At once, Andrew hugged Lucy even more tightly and covered her ears as he gently assured her, it's okay, don't be scared. Then he turned his gaze to Emily. The warmth vanished, replaced by hardened ice. So, you said all that just to tell me that you're refusing to do it. Emily stared back at him, her heart turning to ice. Losing the last of his patience, Andrew said darkly, in that case, toss her into the cold storage. Let her out only when she agrees to make the cookies. His bodyguards immediately seized her. Ignoring her wails and attempts to break free, they hauled her to the hospital's medical cold storage and slammed the door shut behind her, locking her in. The freezing air wrapped around Emily instantly. She felt as though her wounds were being stabbed by 1,000 icy needles. She could feel her blood slowing. The internal bleeding was getting worse, and she could feel her life slipping away. Both the coldness and despair gnawed at her. As her consciousness slowly faded away, making her feel she would die there, her sheer will to live won over her pathetic pride. Using the last of her strength, she crawled over to the metal door and pounded it, screaming weakly, I'll do it, let me out. The metal door opened. She was hauled out like a broken doll and thrown onto the floor of the hospital kitchen. Dragging her cold and pain-racked body around, she used the final scraps of her willpower to prepare a tray of gingerbread cookies. When she delivered it to the hospital room, Andrew simply glanced at her before gesturing at his bodyguards, saying, Take her back to the operating room. Emily was brought right back onto the operating table. When the anesthetic hit her veins, she started losing consciousness. A single tear trickled down the corner of her eye as she thought to herself, From now on, Andrew, you and I will be nothing more than strangers. I will never love you again. Chapter 5. The days after the surgery were long and agonizing. Emily lay alone on the hospital bed, watching the IV drip slowly into her veins, feeling the unrelenting ache that radiated from her wounds. Every wound redressing felt like torture to her. The nurse tried to be as gentle as possible, but the pity in her eyes cut deeper than any scalpel. Please bear with it. It'll be over soon, the nurse said softly. After the nurse left, Emily heard the hushed voices of the nurse talking to her colleague out in the hallway. I really feel bad for her. Even though she's so badly injured, not a single family member came to see her. She even had to sign the surgery consent form herself. I feel the same way. Meanwhile, look at Ms. Evans in the VIP ward. All she got was a little scratch, but Mr. Stone hasn't left her side at all. I heard he even brushed aside several multi-billion-dollar projects just to accompany her. Some people have all the luck in the world. Their words stabbed Emily in the heart, but she'd grown numb to the feeling. She simply turned her head toward the window, shut her eyes, and pretended she heard nothing at all. On the day Emily was finally discharged, the sky was overcast. After finishing the paperwork, she'd only just stepped out of the hospital entrance when a few of her childhood friends popped their heads out of the car parked outside. They'd been waiting for her. One of them, Justin Farrow, called out, Over here, Emmy. Upon seeing the familiar faces smiling at her, Emily finally felt a sense of warmth spreading through her long-freezing heart. That night, they took her to a bar they frequented, insisting on celebrating her release from hell and her regained freedom. Getting a divorce is the best thing to happen to you. That jerk Andrew doesn't deserve you. That's right. You're a stunning woman who comes from a distinguished background, Emmy. Even without Andrew, you'll have men forming a line long enough to circle the globe, all fighting for a chance to be with you. Exactly. Tomorrow, I'll introduce a few handsome young men to you. I can guarantee that every last one of them will be much better than that cold and emotionless Andrew. Emily's friends joked around, doing their best to lift her spirits. As she sipped her cocktail, a long-absent smile finally returned to her face. They were right, of course. Why should she degrade herself for a man who didn't love her? Halfway through, she excused herself to the restroom, but when she came back, the booth was empty. Her friends were nowhere to be found. "Excuse me, where did my friends go?" she asked a passing server. With an uneasy expression, the server pointed at a VIP lounge down the hallway and said, "Just a few moments ago, a drunk young woman insisted on getting a few male escorts to accompany her. She wasn't happy with all the ones she saw, and when she saw your friends, she got her bodyguards to drag them inside. She had too many bodyguards with her, so we dared not stop her." Emily tensed up. Her friends were relatively well known among the upper society. No ordinary person would dare to offend them unless, gripped with a bad feeling, she rushed forward and barged right into the VIP lounge. Sure enough, inside the room, the drunk Lucy was clutching Justin's arm, insisting on pressing herself against him. Justin was pale with fury, but since it was a woman who was manhandling him, he tried his best to keep his temper in check. "Lucy, let go of my friend," Emily shouted as she rushed forward to yank Lucy off Justin. Just then the door was kicked open, and Andrew stormed in, his expression dark and furious. He grabbed Lucy by the wrist, his voice low and simmering with barely contained rage. "Lulu, what the hell are you doing in a place like this?" Lucy jerked her hand away, her eyes glassy. She jabbed a finger toward Emily's friends and declared haughtily, "Can't you tell? I'm choosing a male escort to keep me company. These ones are cute. I want all of them." "Don't be ridiculous. I forbid you from doing this," Andrew snarled, his expression turning even darker as he reached out to grab her. However, Lucy gave him a hard shove before wailing in discontent. "Why do you get to fool around when I don't, huh? You're free to smile at other women and spend hours in your office with that female client of yours, so why can't I spend time with a few male escorts, huh?" Ian hurriedly stepped in to explain. "You got the wrong idea, Ms. Evans. Mr. Stone was just discussing a very important business collaboration. He certainly doesn't have any." "I don't care," Lucy interrupted, refusing to listen to reason. In her drunken state, she tried to put her hands on Justin again. "Since you get to be intimate with other women, I can do it with other men too." Emily couldn't take it any longer. Standing defensively in front of her friends, she shouted, "That's enough. If you two are having a lover's spat, that's your business. Don't harass my friends and drag them into this." Chapter 6. Andrew's icy gaze finally shifted to Emily. After looking at the handsome and sophisticated-looking men standing behind her, his expression turned dangerously stormy. "I've warned you never to pull any dirty tricks against Lucy, Emily. What's the meaning of this? You couldn't do anything yourself, so you got your friends to seduce her." Emily couldn't believe what she was hearing. Did he just accuse her friends of seducing Lucy? "Are you blind, Andrew? Lucy's clearly the one who's harassing my friends." Andrew was about to retort when Lucy stomped her foot. Pissed that he wasn't immediately doing everything he could to coax her, she turned and stormed out of the room. "Lulu." Andrew instantly went after her, his tone turning frantic and affectionate as he said, Okay, don't be mad, it's all my fault. I'll make sure we have others present next time. What do you say?" However, he didn't forget to turn to his bodyguards and instruct them. Which of those men touched Ms. Evans? Break his arm. Then he dashed off after Lucy. The bodyguard stepped forward immediately, ready to carry out his command. Unable to believe what was happening, Emily jumped in front of her friends and screamed, "Don't you dare! Stop acting like you're blind." Were they the ones who made the first move? It was clearly Lucy who started harassing them first. "They're all my friends and well-known members of upper society. Don't you dare lay a finger on them." However, the head of the bodyguards replied with a neutral expression, "Don't make things difficult for us, Ms. Jameson. Your friends may come from prominent backgrounds, but their families are nothing in Mr. Stone's eyes. One word from him is enough to bankrupt their families. I need to carry out Mr. Stone's order to his satisfaction." Consumed with rage and powerlessness, Emily felt her entire body turn cold. She knew that what the bodyguard said was true. For the first time ever, she loathed the fact that she'd married Andrew. Not only did she suffer endless humiliation, but she was also dragging her best friends down with her. Taking a deep breath, she composed herself and said firmly, "Fine. I'll make sure you get to fulfill his order in a satisfactory manner. She grabbed a decorative metal rod from the side, and under everyone's shocked gazes, she smashed her left wrist with it. A sharp crack rang out, followed by an excruciating pain as her left hand fell limp to her side. "Emmy!" Justin and all her other friends cried out as they rushed forward to hold her steady. Her face was ashen and covered in sweat, but she forced herself to stay upright and said to the bodyguard, "Is that enough for you to report back to him? I took the blow in his place." The bodyguard stared at her with mixed emotions before leaving without another word. Feeling terrible for Emily, her friends continued to support her as they exclaimed, "Why did you do something so silly? We could have just fought them." "You won't win," she replied with a weak shake of her head, her lips trembling from the pain. "It's fine. The doctors can just set my bone." Frantic and panicked, they rushed her out of the bar to take her to the hospital. As soon as they reached the entrance of the bar, they heard an impassioned argument coming from the balcony on the second floor. Emily instinctively looked up, only to find that Lucy had somehow climbed onto the edge of the balcony and was on the verge of falling. "Don't come near me. I haven't forgiven you yet. Come any closer and I'll jump," Lucy wailed. Andrew stood a few steps away, his usually composed face twisted with fear. "Lulu, don't do anything foolish. Come down from there right now. As long as you do, I'll do whatever you want." "Really? Anything?" Lucy asked between sobs. "Of course, even if it costs me my life." As Emily listened to them, she felt both a sense of absurdity and bitterness. Just how much did Andrew love Lucy that he would readily tolerate such an outrageous threat? Just then, as if Andrew had managed to appease her, Lucy carefully tried to come down from the balcony railing, only to end up slipping. While everyone exclaimed in shock, she fell off the second floor and right onto Emily, who'd just come out of the bar. The impact of a human being slamming right against her knocked the air from Emily's lungs, and darkness swallowed her whole. The pain shot through every inch of her body as she ended up being a human cushion for Lucy. Andrew flew down to the entrance in a frenzy. When he saw what happened, he didn't even hesitate to scoop up the frightened Lucy, his voice shaking with panic as he said, "Lulu, how are you feeling, Lulu? Don't be scared. I'll take you to the hospital right away." With Lucy in his arms, he dashed straight to his car, not once glancing at Emily, who'd been crushed under his beloved Lucy, her fate still unknown. Chapter 7. Emily's friends watched Andrew's car disappear down the road, the taillights vanishing into the night. They trembled with rage, but there was nothing they could do. Their only option was to rush the heavily injured Emily to the hospital. When she woke up in the hospital once more, the only person beside her was a nurse. "You're awake, Ms. Jameson. Thankfully, your friends brought you to the hospital in time, but they had to leave to attend to some emergencies at their companies. They instructed us to inform them when you wake up." "It's fine," Emily said hoarsely. "They're very busy, don't bother them." The nurse looked at her with pity as she said, "But you need someone to look after you." "I'll be fine by myself," Emily interrupted before closing her eyes, hiding all traces of her fragility. The long, lonely days of recovery stretched on. She ate alone, changed her own bandages, and took care of herself. On the day of her hospital discharge, she completed the paperwork herself before heading back to the villa. She began cleaning up the place, tossing out all of the clothes and gifts that she'd carefully selected for Andrew without him ever sparing them a glance. She also threw out all of the matching items she'd gotten for them. Just as she dragged her exhausted body around to clear out the last pile of trash, the front door opened. Andrew came in with his arm wrapped around Lucy's waist. Without even glancing at Emily, who was in the middle of throwing the things out, he said to his butler, "Lulu has been feeling unwell lately and needs to recover in peace. She'll be staying here for a while. Prepare the bedroom with the most natural light and replace everything with new ones according to her preferences. She likes pink. The bed linens must be made of silk, and the curtains must block out all light. Make sure there are fresh white roses in the room every day and her meals." He went on and on in a serious voice, giving the clearest instructions. From the staircase. Emily listened. Each word made her heart feel as if it were cast in ice. She recalled what it had been like when she first moved into the villa. Andrew simply instructed Ian to take her to a guest room, saying, "If you need anything, talk to the butler about it." So this was the stark difference between someone who was loved and someone who was. With her head lowered, she continued making her way up the stairs. "Hold it!" Lucy shouted, her eyes red as she pointed at Emily's dress. "Why are you wearing matching clothes with Andrew?" Emily blinked, startled. It was only then that she noticed how Andrew was wearing a blue shirt while she was wearing an old blue dress. It was just a similar shade of blue. Just as she was about to speak, Lucy flew into a tantrum, refusing to drop the matter. Andrew belongs to no one but me. I'm the only one who can wear the same color as him. Take that dress off now. Emily couldn't believe what she'd just heard. This is just a coincidence. I don't care, take it off, Lucy shrieked before throwing herself into Andrew's arms and sobbing. Look at her, Andrew, she's bullying me. Scowling, Andrew didn't even hesitate to instruct the maids. Didn't you hear what Lulu said? Take her dress off. Andrew, how dare you? Emily exclaimed as she backed away in terror. Alas, the maids obeyed no one but Andrew. They immediately came forward and ripped her dress off in spite of her struggles and cries. The dress tore with a piercing sound. Soon, Emily was standing in the living room in nothing but her underwear, right under the gazes of all the staff, some pitying and others scornful. The fury, shame, and despair threatened to send her into a breakdown. Andrew's icy voice rang out. Pay closer attention next time. Don't ever wear the same color as me, or Lulu might misunderstand and get upset. Otherwise, it won't be as simple as getting you to undress. Trembling violently, Emily fled back to her room in a state of complete disarray. Chapter 8. In the days that followed, Emily finally understood just how far Andrew would go to dote on another person. When Lucy said she wanted a very specific brand of cherry pudding that wasn't sold locally, Andrew bought out an international flight just to have it imported overnight. When Lucy said she was afraid of the dark and couldn't sleep at night, he dropped all of his work and spent the entire night holding her in his arms to coax her to bed. And when she declared in the middle of the night that she wanted to watch a meteor shower, he flew her in his private jet to a mountaintop with the best view. Even the staff discussed this in private. Mr. Stone really dotes on Ms. Evans like nobody's business. Yeah, I've never seen him like this before. It's like he's a completely different man. Guess this is the one he truly loves. As for the previous one, what a shame. Emily heard every word. Each sentence cut through her like glass, but she didn't say a thing. All she could do was hide in her private art studio. It was her only sanctuary in the entire villa. One day, Lucy wandered into the art studio and took a fancy to an oil painting hanging on the wall. That's a pretty painting. I want it in my room, she said matter-of-factly while pointing at it. Emily immediately refused her. You can't have it. That's the final piece my mentor did before his passing. Pouting, Lucy whined, Oh, just give it to me, I really like it. I said no, Emily firmly replied. I'm not Andrew, I won't give in just because you pout at me. I won't give this painting to anyone. After seeing how Emily couldn't be convinced, Lucy became displeased. How about I pay you for it? That should suffice, no, name your price. I'm not selling it, please get out, Emily replied with an icy expression before turning to leave the art studio. Angered, Lucy grabbed her and screeched, What makes you think you can say no to me? Emily instinctively shook Lucy's hand off, but Lucy lost her balance and let out a yelp before crumpling onto the floor. Her forehead hit the sharp edge of the easel, instantly drawing blood. Ouch, it hurts! The door flew open, and Andrew rushed in after having heard the commotion. After taking in the situation, his expression turned as dark as night when he saw the bleeding Lucy sobbing on the floor with Emily standing on the side. He went straight to Lucy and lifted her up, asking anxiously, What happened, Lulu? Tears streamed down Lucy's face as she pointed at Emily, wailing, Andrew, didn't you say I could have anything in this room? I like that painting, but not only did she refuse to give it to me, she even pushed me. Look at my forehead. It hurts so much. You have to get even for me. I didn't push her, Emily protested. She's the one who lost her balance. Shut up, Andrew snapped, cutting Emily off, his gaze icy cold. Have I been too tolerant with you, Emily? Turning to his bodyguards, he commanded, Bring me that painting. No, Emily flew over to protect the painting, but one of the bodyguards easily shoved her aside. Two of them yanked the painting right off the wall, but Emily grabbed the corner of the frame and refused to let go. Please, I'm begging you, don't do it. This is the last of my mentor's pieces that... Amid the struggling, the canvas ended up ripping right down the center, creating a massive gap. Staring at the now-ruined painting, Emily crumpled to the floor, all of her energy drained. Her gaze turned hollow. It was as if her world had collapsed around her. Even Lucy was briefly startled before she started sobbing even louder. My painting! That beautiful painting, it's destroyed now. Her tears immediately made Andrew's heart ache as he tried to appease her. Don't cry, Lulu, it's just a painting. I'll go to an auction tomorrow and buy you an even better and more expensive one, okay? I don't want another painting. I want that one, that exact same one," Lucy insisted before pointing at the shaken Emily. "She ruined it. Since she ruined my painting, she should pay for it. I want to draw the exact painting on her back." Emily's head snapped up and she stared at Lucy in disbelief. Andrew frowned, but after seeing Lucy's reddened eyes, he gave in. "Fine, whatever you say. Andrew, have you lost your mind?" Emily screamed as she tried to flee, but the bodyguards pressed her down. To her horror, Lucy instructed the staff to bring her a long silver needle to act as her brush. As for the paint, it was a red concoction of water and chili powder. "No, don't, you can't do this to me, Andrew." Emily cried out in despair, but Andrew simply eyed her coldly as he commanded his bodyguards, "Hold her down so that Lulu can make the painting." The cold needle pierced right through her skin, spreading the burning sensation from the chilly water as it carved all over her back. Even as the pain racked through her body, making her scream in agony, Lucy happily drew away, as if creating a masterpiece. "See, this is what happens when you refuse me," Lucy said. After finishing her final stroke, she stared at the horrifying painting on Emily's bloodied back in smug delight. Through it all, Andrew never once bothered to look at Emily. He simply hugged Lucy and asked dotingly, "Do you feel better now?" "Yeah, loads better," Lucy replied sweetly as she nestled into his arms. Lowering his head, he kissed her head before asking suggestively, "Then, isn't it time for me to feel good as well?" He scooped Lucy right off her feet, and ignoring the barely conscious Emily, headed straight to the bedroom upstairs. Emily could vaguely hear Lucy giggle as Andrew said in a husky voice filled with his desire, a voice she'd never heard before, "You're so good, babe." Chapter 9. Emily nearly died from the pain alone. Fortunately, the family physician had been informed of the situation and came over in time to give her a heavy dose of painkillers and anti-inflammation medicine before carefully treating her wounds. "Luckily, you got treatment in time. There won't be any scars, but you mustn't let your wounds come into contact with water for a while. Make sure you get plenty of rest," the physician instructed. Emily lay face down in bed. Her tears had long dried up. Maybe the physical wounds on her body could heal, but the wounds in her heart had long since festered beyond help. For the next few days, she locked herself in her room, like a snail retreating into its shell, too scared to face the heartbreaking reality. When the sound of music and bustling commotion rang out downstairs, Emily was abruptly reminded that it was Lucy's birthday today. Andrew was throwing Lucy a lavish birthday party right in the house. In the end, Emily emerged from her room. She stood on the second floor, watching from above like an uninvolved spectator. She watched as Andrew showered all of his gentleness and patience on the spoiled and willful Lucy. Lucy grumbled about one thing after another. First, she said the cake wasn't pretty enough. Then, she complained that the guests were looking at her funny. She kept coming up with new ways to throw a tantrum, but Andrew accepted all of it with endless indulgence, even bending down to adjust the hem of her dress himself. Someone inadvertently spotted Emily upstairs, and without thinking called out, "Mrs. Stone." That immediately drove Lucy mad. She threw down her wine glass and tearfully shrieked at Andrew, "Andrew, you said that even though we didn't get married, I'm the one you love and the only one who can be your wife. So why does she get to be called Mrs. Stone?" Andrew immediately tried to placate her. There, ignore it, it's just a form of address." "I won't ignore it, you lied to me," Lucy wailed. "I'll only accept it if you announce to everyone that no one is allowed to call her Mrs. Stone, and I want her punished. Hey, you. Fill the pool with broken glass and have her pick up every last shard herself. She mustn't miss a single piece." Immediately, the bodyguard glanced at Andrew. Seeing that he said nothing, the bodyguard rushed off and poured an entire basket's worth of broken glass into the pool. The guests gasped in shock, but Andrew didn't even flinch as he commanded Emily, "Didn't you hear what Lulu said? Get in there and pick everything up." Standing at the top of the stairs, Emily felt chilled to the bone. "Must you insist on humiliating me like this, Andrew?" "Humiliate you?" Andrew repeated with a sneer. "Need I remind you that a single word from me is enough to determine the fate of your parents' company?" As if struck by lightning, Emily turned ghostly pale. He was actually using the company, the results of her parents' hard work, to threaten her. She stared at the glass that glinted in the pool before taking one last look at Andrew's heartless expression. The final flicker of hope in her had crumbled into dust as well. Emily slowly descended the stairs as everyone looked at her, their expressions varying between taunting and pitying. Step by step, she got into the icy pool. The moment her feet touched the water, the shards sliced into her skin. Blood streamed out, clouding the water. Every shard of glass she picked up left yet another cut on her hand, the stinging pain shooting right to her heart. Yet, as if she couldn't feel any pain, she repeated the motions robotically. At last, Emily gathered the final piece of glass. She was soaking wet, her hands completely covered in blood as she climbed out of the pool and stood in front of Andrew and Lucy. Andrew's eyes didn't even flicker as he took in her miserable state. He simply made a curt announcement to the guests. "See that? From now on, anyone who dares call her Mrs. Stone will be making an enemy out of me." He crushed all of her dignity right beneath his feet. From that moment on, Emily's heart went cold, and her feelings for him died out completely. She hauled her bloody self out the door. Each step was as painful as walking on blades, but she also felt as though she was escaping a suffocating swamp. The moment she exited the villa, her phone rang. Kyle, her lawyer, called to inform her, "Ms. Jameson, the divorce decree for your and Mr. Stone's marriage has been issued. Are you free to come over today and collect the divorce certificate?" Emily clutched her phone, processing the words. Out of nowhere, she started laughing softly, but her tears began streaming down soon after. "I'm free. I'll be right over," she said. When Emily finally had the divorce certificate in hand, she felt a sense of relief like never before. On the way back to the villa, she saw the massive LED billboard in the center of the city, and she came to a decision. Andrew didn't want her to be his wife, right? Well, she would grant him his wish and inform the entire world that she, Emily Jameson, no longer had anything to do with Andrew Stone. After getting the cab to stop, she headed straight to an advertising firm. She paid top dollar to buy out every digital billboard in the city tomorrow to play a single announcement on repeat. All it contained was a simple yet blunt statement. "This is an official announcement that Mr. Andrew Stone and Ms. Emily Jameson have formally dissolved their marriage as of today. Effective immediately, both parties will be going their separate ways. Ms. Jameson is now single and open to new relationships." Done with that, she returned to the villa, packed up her belongings, and booked the earliest flight out of the country. She was leaving this place without the slightest bit of hesitation. As the plane soared through the clouds, Emily looked down at the shrinking city without feeling even the faintest stir in her heart. She didn't care how Andrew would react once he found out that every lead billboard in the city was plastered with the announcement of his divorce. All she knew was that she was free now. The sun rose as usual the next day, and Lucy was still fast asleep when Andrew woke up. Out of habit, he grabbed his phone to start dealing with work, only to find that his screen was covered with missed call notifications and unread messages. He also saw the latest news headline. "Breaking news! Andrew Stone, world's richest man, dumped. Ex-wife Emily Jameson blasts citywide ads announcing she's single and ready to date." Chapter 10. All of Andrew's drowsiness disappeared in an instant. He shot up in bed as he repeated the words in his head. He'd been dumped. There were citywide ads about it. Andrew immediately made a call, his voice icy as he commanded, "Get in touch with the head of every ad agency that runs the LED billboards in the city. Within 3 minutes, I want to know who allowed these ads to run." Before his order could even go through, the built-in smart screen on the bedroom wall flickered to life on its own. The morning news was running, and the bright red banner that scrolled at the bottom of the screen was also sharing the official announcement of his divorce. "This is an official announcement that Mr. Andrew Stone and Ms. Emily Jameson have formally dissolved their marriage as of today. Effective immediately, both parties will be going their separate ways. Ms. Jameson is now single and open to new relationships." Every word hit Andrew like a slap across his face. He was so consumed by his fury that his expression turned terrifyingly stormy. He almost crushed the phone in his hands. What gave Emily the audacity to do this? How dare she humiliate him like this? How could they be divorced? How could she have filed for it when he didn't sign any divorce papers? "Look into this at once," Andrew yelled at Tyler, who came rushing over after hearing the news. He was so furious that his veins were popping. How did she get the divorce finalized? Who at the courthouse would dare to defy the law on her behalf? Terrified by Andrew's rage, Tyler hurriedly acknowledged the command and dashed off to investigate the situation. Andrew tugged on the collar of his pajamas in irritation. Underneath the blazing anger was something subtler, the faint flicker of panic that even he didn't notice. It felt like something had just slipped out of his hands. Soon, Tyler got to the bottom of things and shakily reported, I've looked into it, Mr. Stone. The divorce was filed in accordance with the proper legal procedures. Sweating profusely, he steeled himself and added, Why, your signature is on the divorce agreement, so it's legally binding. His signature was on it. Andrew tensed at the recollection of something. Some time ago, Lucy had said how nice his signature looked and cajoled him into teaching her how to do it. He relented and taught her how to replicate his exact signature well enough to fool even the best forensic document examiner, which meant that documents she signed with his signature were just as legally binding. At the time, he even said that she could sign whatever she pleased with it. Could it be? At that moment, Lucy came out of the bedroom, rubbing her sleepy eyes. After nestling up against Andrew, she asked with a pout, Why is it so noisy out here, Andrew? I haven't had enough sleep yet. Forcing aside his fury, Andrew pulled Lucy away from him a little before showing her the announcement on his phone. Lulu, did you sign something with my signature recently? He asked grimly. She blinked at the words on the screen. Something hit her, and for a second her gaze flickered evasively. However, her expression instantly morphed into one of grievous hurt, her eyes reddening. I didn't know it was a divorce agreement. Back at the auction the other day, she stuffed a document into my hands and said it was something urgent that needed your signature. I figured that since you were so busy. Besides, you also said I could sign anything on your behalf. I didn't want you to be bothered with unnecessary things, so I signed it. The more Lucy spoke, the more aggrieved she sounded. Her tears splattered onto the floor as she continued. How should I know it a divorce agreement? Are you mad, Andrew? Do you regret what happened? Do you think I ruined your marriage? Are you abandoning me? She cried so pitifully as she clutched his sleeve tightly, her body trembling as if enduring a great injustice and immense sense of fear. Seeing her like this, Andrew couldn't help but soften his attitude a little. When he remembered that he had indeed indulged her by teaching her his signature, most of his anger dissipated. And when he heard her ask if he wanted to abandon her, he was instantly reminded of how she'd once saved his life. When he'd been on the brink of death, she was the one who stubbornly stayed by his side. All at once, he pinned all of the anger and displeasure he felt as a result of this incident onto Emily. It had to be her fault. She was the scheming woman who made use of both the gullible Lucy and the chaos of the situation back then to achieve her goal of getting a divorce. It was just as well. Taking a deep breath, Andrew pushed aside the inexplicable sense of uneasiness in his heart and pulled Lucy into his arms to comfort her. There, don't cry. I'm not blaming you for what happened. It's just as well that we're divorced. I never had any feelings for her anyway. This means I can openly be with you without anything holding us back. Chapter 11. Emily's tearful expression finally broke into a smile as she cuddled up against Andrew. However, a glint of gleeful triumph flashed in her eyes. To prove to both himself and the rest of the world that this was a new beginning, Andrew started bringing Emily along to all sorts of high-profile events. He bought her the most expensive jewelry, brought her to the most upscale auctions, and even rented out entire restaurants just for her to dine in. Lucy did her best to play along. She behaved all sweet and lovely in front of others, obeying his every word. Alas, Andrew was the only one who knew that behind this seemingly perfect life was his ever-mounting level of fatigue. Lucy's whims and demands grew ever more outrageous. She spent one day complaining about how the private jet wasn't big enough, and the next ranting that the champagne on the yacht wasn't the right vintage. The day after that, she threw a tantrum and smashed everything around her, all because he refused to skip an extremely important international meeting to fly abroad and see the northern lights with her. Every single time, Andrew would be reminded of the so-called debt of gratitude he owed her for saving his life. He would then choose to compromise and give in to her. That being said, the frustration and hollowness in his heart continued to snowball. Now and then, he would find himself vaguely recalling how, in the last 5 years, not once had Emily ever asked him for anything. She would always stay on the side in silence, passing him a glass of warm water when he got home and quietly preparing a snack for him when he worked overnight. The thought lingered for only a second before vanishing, but somehow it made him feel even more bothered. Slowly but steadily, 3 years passed. The rose-tinted glasses that Andrew had when it came to Lucy slowly came off in the daily interactions he had with her. They'd revealed her vanity, extreme extravagance, and volatile temper. She went all around the world using his credit card to go on manic shopping sprees. Her closet was filled with various luxury goods, all with the tag on, never once worn. Lucy demanded that Andrew respond to her messages within seconds. If he took even just a minute longer, she would spam the company line with calls, not caring whether he was chairing an important meeting that involved billions in investment. She frequently used the fact that she'd saved his life to guilt-trip him. "Andrew, have you forgotten who it was that saved you when you almost died? You're all I have left. You can't ignore me." On and on she went. Andrew had never felt as suffocated as he did now. Still, out of his initial gratitude and the heavy burden of responsibility, most of the time he chose to indulge in her whims. Nevertheless, the emptiness in his heart and sense of exasperation never stopped growing. The breaking point came during a major product launch. A tech company under Stone Group had created a premium smart office device aimed at high-end business clients, which needed to be marketed with a solemn and professional approach. However, when the company was choosing a global spokesperson for the product, Lucy ignored the marketing and PR department's strong objections and insisted on choosing a popular male celebrity she was recently obsessed with, one who had the image of a sexy, devilish man. "I want him to be the spokesperson. Look how handsome he is. He'll definitely make." "I don't want the product to go screaming." Lucy shrieked as she threw a tantrum in the office, all kicking and, "You don't love me anymore. You don't care about my feelings at all." Too exhausted to deal with this anymore, Andrew ended up going against his better judgment and relenting. To nobody's shock, the advertising campaign was hit with instant backlash the moment it launched. The celebrity's image clashed terribly with the product's professional positioning, angering its target market, who expressed their strong disapproval and aversion. Stock prices fell, the massive advertising budget had gone down the drain, and the entire project suffered a devastating loss. In the conference room, Andrew stared at the grim data report, his face pale. For the first time, he snapped at Lucy. "Look at what you've done. Do you think this is just a game? This is a multi-billion-dollar project." Lucy was terrified at first, but then, like a bristling cat, she immediately teared up and screamed back at him at the top of her lungs. "How dare you yell at me? Are you actually yelling at me just because of a bit of money? You've changed, Andrew. Have you forgotten who it was who saved your life back then? You would have ended up dead long ago if it hadn't been for me. How can you now treat me like this over some money? Do you not love me anymore?" There it was again. Andrew stared at her contorted expression as she resorted to her usual trick of emotional manipulation. Out of nowhere, an overwhelming wave of disappointment and suspicion washed over him. For the first time, it became clear to him that the unreasonable woman throwing a hissy fit in front of him felt like an entirely different person from the kind and innocent young woman he remembered saving him. Just then, his phone buzzed. He'd received an alert about the latest business headline. Rising product designer Emily Jamieson wins International Design Award with Lumen Reverie, sparking global buzz over classical, inspired aesthetics. It was Emily. Chapter 12. Andrew's fingers froze. Over the past 3 years, he'd occasionally heard a bit of news about Emily. She'd gone abroad to study at a top design academy, and her works had begun to appear at small, niche exhibitions. After graduating, she'd quietly returned to the country and started her own studio. Every piece of news felt like a pinprick to his heart, giving him an inexplicable sense of annoyance and despondency. He found himself comparing Emily's quiet independence to Lucy's taxing reliance on him. Emily, the ex-wife he'd once ignored completely and discarded as if she were trash, had quietly bloomed out of his sight, slowly revealing her dazzling existence. The brilliance of her newfound glory only made his new life seem even more chaotic and pathetic. A week later, it was time for the Triennial High Society Charity Gala. It was a gathering of all the most prominent people in society. Andrew attended the event with Lucy. Intent on being the center of attention, Lucy wore an outrageously elaborate gown, encrusted with crushed diamonds. Her makeup was meticulously done, but bordered on garish. Every single one of her gestures carried a deliberate air of showiness and coquettishness, drawing countless sidelong glances. When Andrew looked at her, he felt nothing but exhaustion. Subconsciously, her eyes began wandering across the venue. Just then, a faint stir came from the entrance of the ballroom. All eyes converged on the striking figure slowly entering the place. It was Emily. She wore a black satin gown with a sleek, minimalist style. There were no other accessories, but the gown perfectly accentuated her slender, graceful figure. Her long black hair was loosely pinned up, revealing her elegant neck and collarbone. Her makeup was subtle, but her complexion glowed, while her gaze was calm and self-assured. She had a quiet yet undeniable radiance to her. Invited as an art consultant and collaborative designer for an international environmental foundation, she immediately captivated the room, becoming the true center of attention. Andrew's eyes were glued to her as well. He couldn't pull them off her. He felt as if he'd been struck in the chest, making his heart flutter in an unfamiliar yet intense manner. The Emily before him was nothing like the meek and timid wife he had, who was always surrounded by an air of melancholy. When had she become this dazzling? Lucy spotted Emily as well and saw how Emily had easily snatched up all of the attention that was meant to be on her. Infuriated, she raised her voice and remarked pointedly, "Look at that gown, Andrew. It's so plain. She looks like she's attending a funeral. It's in such bad taste." Andrew, however, didn't seem to have heard her ranting. All of his focus went to the men who circled Emily, having been drawn to her. They were some of the brightest and most talented men in the country, including the new CEO of a tech giant, an intentionally acclaimed architect, and an experienced investor with major connections. All of them spoke with Emily easily, their eyes filled with open admiration and respect. She stood among them, poised and confident, laughing and conversing with effortless grace, her demeanor refined and sophisticated. An unexpected pang of intense jealousy and rage shot through Andrew. Almost instinctively, he released Lucy and walked toward Emily. "Emily," he called, his voice laced with a hint of coldness and an almost imperceptible tone of someone marking his territory. Hearing her name, Emily turned her head, her smile fading when she saw Andrew. Her gaze remained still as she greeted in a courteous yet distant manner. "It's been a while, Mr. Stone." Chapter 13. By addressing Andrew as Mr. Stone, Emily instantly highlighted the infinite distance between them. She offered an apologetic smile to the men around her, saying, "Please excuse me for a moment." The men nodded knowingly, their eyes flicking toward Andrew with a hint of scrutiny and barely concealed mockery. Andrew's temper flared at the way she treated him as though he were a complete stranger. He was just about to speak when Emily subconsciously rubbed her shoulders, feeling cold in the heavily air-conditioned ballroom. The young CEO of the tech company beside her noticed it immediately. He draped his suit jacket over her shoulders as if it were the most natural thing to do and said gently, "Don't catch a cold." Briefly startled, Emily broke into a smile and said softly, "Thank you." Their effortless interaction, and the look of warm concern in the man's eyes, all felt like a stab in the heart to Andrew. A surge of uncontrollable anger and jealousy overwhelmed his reason. His fists clenched, the veins along his arms bulging, and he almost blew his top right then and there. After that night, Andrew realized he couldn't stay calm about it at all. Emily's composed, indifferent expression, her eyes that no longer lingered on him, and the image of that man draping his jacket over her shoulders all kept replaying in his head, as if he'd been cursed. He couldn't accept Emily's complete disregard of him and her attitude that made it seem like he no longer mattered to her. Driven by a strong sense of refusal to accept this situation and a possessive streak that mystified even him, he began coming up with all sorts of excuses to get close to her. Using a product collaboration worth a ton of money as bait, he specifically requested that Emily's studio be in charge of design. He even stipulated that she had to be personally involved in every step of the project. He showed up in person at the meeting to kickstart the project. As he sat at the head of the conference table, he seemed incapable of tearing his eyes away from Emily. She wore a professional business suit, her expression focused as she gave a clear explanation of her design concepts and proposals. When challenged, she responded calmly, but assuredly with precise reasoning backed up by evidence and explanations. Her professionalism, composure, and confidence were unlike anything he had ever seen. He deliberately picked on minor details to garner her attention, even going so far as to make it seem like he was being difficult on purpose. However, through it all, Emily maintained absolute professionalism. She treated him as nothing more than an important client that needed to be tended to with careful courtesy, being even more distant yet polite with him than she was with all other clients. It was as if Andrew were punching the air, which only made him feel even more frustrated and furious. At some point, Lucy somehow managed to find Emily's studio. She came barging right in to cause a scene, accusing Emily of seducing Andrew and being a fly that couldn't be shaken off. She even tried to tear the studio apart. Fortunately, the studio's security team managed to subdue her in time, before informing Emily and Andrew about the situation. When Andrew arrived, he saw the disheveled Lucy still screaming her head off, while Emily stood on the side with an icy expression. "Kindly keep your woman in check, Mr. Stone," Emily said, her voice freezing cold. "This is a workplace, not a stage for her to put on her best impression of a madwoman. If this happens again, I'll let the police handle matters instead." After taking in Emily's cold gaze, Andrew looked at the hysterical Lucy. Hit with a surge of anger and mortification, he yelled, "That's enough, Lucy. Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough yet? Shut up and leave at once." Lucy was shocked to hear him yell at her. Then, like a lit firecracker, she exploded again. Shrieking, "You yelled at me. Did you just yell at me because of her? Andrew, have you forgotten who? Do you think that just because you?" In his panic, the words tumbled out of his mouth, but just as he was about to stop her from bringing up how she'd saved his life, he faltered halfway through his sentence, coming to an abrupt stop. Chapter 14. A hazy, fragmented memory flashed across Andrew's mind without warning. He remembered the blinding headlights and excruciating pain. He heard a vague but anxious and tearful female voice calling his name. He felt a pair of warm, trembling hands pressing hard against his wound. That voice and that feeling. Why didn't the voice sound anything like Lucy's usual coquettish tone? Even Andrew was stunned. Why did this thought just occur to him out of nowhere? Lucy sensed the way he paused ever so briefly, with a mix of emotions in his eyes, and used it like a weapon to her advantage. She began sobbing even more tragically, her voice shrill as she screamed, "Because of what, huh? Go on. Were you about to say that I was wrong for saving you all those years ago? You've been thinking about ditching me for a long time now, haven't you? You're heartless, Andrew." Her screams gave him a splitting headache, and the flicker of doubt was drowned out by her wails. Frazzled, he waved over his bodyguards and had them take her away by force. But once the seed of doubt was planted, it would only keep growing. Since that inexplicable moment of hesitation, Andrew found himself unable to stop recalling the details of the accident that had changed everything. The more he thought about it, the more he found that Lucy's previous account of the situation was too vague and illogical. She had always emphasized that she did everything she could to save him, and that she stayed by his side until the ambulance arrived. However, she could never give any concrete details about the situation. Every time he pressed her for more information, she deflected him with tears by claiming that she'd been too scared and couldn't remember clearly anymore. As the sense of dissonance kept growing, Andrew could no longer fool himself. Late at night, he summoned Peter Bates, his most trusted bodyguard. He instructed him with a grave expression, "I want you to quietly investigate the Westridge accident from all those years ago again. Don't let anyone find out about it, especially Lucy. I want the original recordings from the scene of the accident, the ambulance dispatch logs, the hospital's records, and any eyewitnesses you can find. Spare no expense to get it done." Peter went off to do as told. The days stretched on torturously as Andrew awaited the results of the investigation. He also began to test Lucy. "Lulu, do you remember what color jacket I was wearing the day I got into the accident? What did you use to stop me from bleeding out at the site of the crash? I don't remember it being a handkerchief." Lucy's answers were always hesitant and inconsistent. She would inevitably change the subject by dissolving into a puddle of tears, questioning if he no longer believed her and had grown tired of her. As always, she emphasized how he owed her, using that to trip him. However, her overreaction and sensitivity toward the subject only deepened the suspicion in Andrew's heart. A few days later, Peter finally came back to Andrew with his preliminary findings. Over an encrypted line, he reported cautiously, "Mr. Stone, we found a street cleaner who was responsible for cleaning that stretch of the road at the time. He'd hidden at a distance out of fear, but he did see some of what happened. Based on his description, the first person who gave you emergency aid wasn't Ms. Evans." Andrew's heart clenched as he instructed, "Go on." He said it was a pretty young-looking woman with a gentle face. Even though she'd gone pale with fright, she remained calm as she applied pressure to your wound, and she did it quite professionally. As for Ms. Evans, she seemed to have arrived in a car later on, much later than what she claimed." As if hit with a hammer, Andrew's mind went blank. That blurry, fragmented memory crystallized with shocking clarity now. He recalled the warm, trembling hands and the tearful voice of a woman who was trying her best to remain calm. It was Lucy. It really was Lucy. Chapter 15. A terrifying, staggering suspicion shot through Andrew's mind, spreading like poison and overriding every other thought he had. His heart pounded wildly, and his blood seemed to flow in reverse. However, despite the storm raging inside him, he maintained a calm exterior. There was still insufficient evidence. He needed something irrefutable. Stone Group's collaboration with Emily's studio carried on. During a meeting that delved deeper into the product concepts, Emily proposed a completely new design approach. She wanted to integrate the simple yet evocative style of classical design into modern tech products, forming a type of aesthetic that soothed the stress of high-ranking business professionals. Her explanation was clear and insightful, her logic sound, and her understanding of user psychology struck Andrew with both a sense of affinity and awe. It was as if she had articulated a thought he had long vaguely recognized deep inside himself, but never had the chance to express. He watched her standing by the projector, confidently introducing her design sketches. Her intelligence and inspired ideas seemed to form a halo around her, one so dazzling that he couldn't tear his eyes away from her. In that moment, an inexpressible feeling of admiration and a wave of burning jealousy surged within him. Andrew was jealous of the other men on the project team who could interact with her normally and whom she treated with great professionalism. He was jealous that they could see this brilliant side of her. He, on the other hand, would always be shut out of her world. Lucy, who'd snuck to the company to have lunch with Andrew, chanced upon this scene when she looked through the glass window of the conference room. When she saw the mix of emotions in Andrew's eyes as he stared intently at Emily, she instantly felt threatened. Filled with rage and the fear of losing everything, she lost all reason. Lucy decided to make an extreme gamble. She forged a final letter and faked an attempt to take her own life. Using the most drastic of methods, she tried to force Andrew into marrying her right away, binding him to her for good. She had timed everything meticulously. After setting up the scene in her apartment, she sent him a farewell text, swallowed a large dose of vitamins she disguised as sleeping pills, and lay in bed, waiting. Andrew's heart clenched when he received her message. Despite his suspicion about the car accident, there was still a life at stake right now, so he rushed over at once. He kicked the door open and found Lucy unconscious on the bed, empty pill bottles, and a note scattered beside her. He immediately moved closer to check on her. However, upon closer inspection, he spotted several things that gave the act away. Lucy's breathing was steady, and her complexion was completely normal. There was no sign of her having overdosed on anything. Furthermore, the handwriting on her so-called final letter looked hasty and rushed. His face darkened. Just as he was about to fly off the handle, his phone buzzed. Peter had sent him the full results of the investigation, including a slightly blurry but extremely important dashcam footage. The air seemed to freeze around Andrew as he pressed to play the recording with a trembling finger. The shaky footage was accompanied by the sound of screeching brakes and cars slamming against each other. He watched as his car crumpled upon impact. Soon after that, another car came to an abrupt stop, and a slender figure stumbled out even before the car completely stopped moving. She dashed straight to the driver's seat of his car. It was Emily. Even though the recording didn't capture her voice, he felt as though he could hear her heart-wrenching cries. Andrew watched as she used every ounce of her strength to open his mangled car door. He saw as her hands became instantly covered with the blood bleeding out of him. She pressed desperately on his wound, the blood soaking into her plain, colored dress and staining her pale, despairing face. As she applied pressure to his wound, she kept screaming to those around her for help. He could read her lips as she also screamed at him, "Andrew, Andrew, hang in there." Despite how terrified she looked, she'd remained determined. There was a kind of desperation about her as she fought against the fervent despair of the situation. Toward the end, another car finally pulled to a stop in the corner. Lucy descended from the car and stood a great distance away, covering her mouth as she stared in shock and fear. She dared not come any closer. It wasn't until the wail of the approaching ambulance that she finally reacted. She hurried forward to push aside the nearly spent Emily, acting like she was the one who'd been helping. Andrew. Meanwhile, Emily, the one who'd truly saved his life, collapsed on the side as a result of her fear and exhaustion. She was almost completely ignored by everyone, including the dashcam. Andrew slammed his fist onto the expensive mahogany bedside table. His knuckles swelled up and started bleeding at once, but he didn't seem to feel the pain at all. He felt as though an invisible force had clenched around his heart before tearing it into pieces. Chapter 16. At last, Andrew uncovered the truth. It was Lucy who stayed by his side and did everything she could to save him. It was Emily who ended up covered in his blood after fearlessly rescuing him. Lucy was simply the shameless woman who stole the credit from Emily by pretending to be her. All those years of Andrew's indulgence and compromise, the sense of duty and obligation he'd borne out of the debt of gratitude he owed her, had been reduced to nothing but a colossal joke. What had he done to the one who'd truly saved his life? He'd orchestrated a car accident to threaten her after she tried to look into Lucy. He allowed Lucy to humiliate her before telling her to get lost. Just because Lucy wanted to have some cookies, he hauled her right off the operating table and locked her inside a cold storage. He stood back and watched as Lucy drew on her back with a needle and water dyed red with chili. Not only had he forced her to jump into a pool covered in glass shards, But he'd also used her parents' company to threaten her. Every single thing Andrew had done to Emily felt like a dagger slicing him up as the memories shot through his mind. Every single one of them was stained with Emily's blood and tears and filled with his foolishness and cruelty. Why hadn't he done a thorough check back then? Why had he bought Lucy's clumsy, flawed account of the situation so easily? Why had it never occurred to him that the docile and boring wife from his marriage of convenience would have such a brave and determined side to her? Overwhelming remorse and self-loathing surged like a tsunami, drowning him completely. Finally, Andrew snapped his gaze to the seemingly unconscious Lucy on the bed. His eyes instantly turned cold. He was furious, livid at how he'd been fooled. "Lucy Evans," he snarled through gritted teeth. Lucy, who'd only been pretending to be unconscious, was naturally aware of the fact that Andrew had already seen the dashcam footage. The murderous tone in his voice made her tremble in terror, and she instinctively opened her eyes. Immediately, she saw the rage in his bloodshot eyes and was nearly scared out of her wits. Andrew, let me explain," she stammered as she tried to scramble into an upright position. "You want to explain?" Andrew whipped his phone up and showed her the video that was still playing on the screen. His voice shook with fury as he growled, "What do you have to explain? Are you going to explain how you stole someone else's credit for saving my life and lied to me all these years? Speak." Lucy stared at the footage, her face turning pale. Her body went limp, as if every bone of hers had been taken out of her. She collapsed onto the bed. It was too late. She was done for. Breaking down, she started laughing hysterically, though her laughter soon turned into desperate sobs as she screamed, "Yes, that's right. I lied to you. So what? Who told you to be so dumb? Who told Emily, the stupid woman, not to even take the credit for her own good deed? You deserved it. Both of you deserved everything. One of you is a fool and the other is blind. Ha 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 ha." Andrew stared at her twisted, deranged face, feeling nothing but disgust and detestation. He took back everything he'd ever given Lucy: the supplementary credit card, the apartment, the luxury goods, as well as all of the connections and resources she'd gained through him. Charging her with fraud, slander, and other crimes, he had her kicked out of his world completely, seeing to it that she could never make it in the upper society ever again. In the end, Lucy ended up with her reputation ruined and drowning in debt. She was forced to flee abroad, living in such poverty that she lost her mind. Meanwhile, after overcoming the shock, regret, and rage, Andrew sank into a never-ending abyss of despair. He thought about everything he'd done to Emily all these years: his indifference toward the divorce, the way he acted at the police station, abandoning her at the auction, the humiliation he made her endure at the pool, and the wounds he'd allowed Lucy to inflict on her back. Every act he'd taken and condoned stemmed from a ridiculous lie, and every single moment of suffering had been inflicted on the person who'd truly saved his life. Chapter 17. Just what had Andrew done? The immense pain and regret he felt gnawed at his heart, leaving him in such agony that he could barely breathe. He rushed out the door with only one thought in mind: to find Emily. Andrew began camping outside her studio and her new apartment. The once proud and always composed owner of a business empire now walked around looking unkempt in a wrinkled suit and with stubble on his face. His bloodshot eyes were sunken and hollow, but they stared, unblinking, at every exit. He stumbled forward, intercepting her path, his voice hoarse and broken as he spoke with feverish urgency. Emily, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I was so wrong, I've found out about everything." His words tumbled out in a frenzy as he reached for Emily's hand, but she deftly avoided him. Andrew pressed on, saying, "I know it's too late to say all of this, it's all too much of a joke. I'm the fool. I'm the blind idiot. I stupidly trusted Lucy and did you wrong. You're the one who saved me, but I..." Emily listened quietly, her face unreadable, as though she was taking in a story that didn't concern her. It was only after he'd finished speaking, panting as he stared pleadingly at her, that she finally spoke, her voice ice, cold and her tone courteous but detached. "Thanks for informing me of the truth, Andrew. It answered some of the questions I've always had." She paused there. There was no hatred or anger in her eyes, only a cold sense of acceptance and even a faint trace of pity. "However, this doesn't change anything," she added firmly. "The fate of our relationship was sealed from the moment you kept casting me aside and hurting me for her sake. It's a tragedy that your love and resentment were all the result of an outrageous misunderstanding. I don't hate you anymore. It takes energy to hate someone, and I don't want to waste any of mine on you. Nevertheless, I won't ever love you either. Things between us ended for good long ago." Her words were a final judgment, cold and delivered with irrefutable clarity. It left no room for hope. Each word was like an icicle piercing Andrew's heart. It splintered the last of his hope and shattered it completely. He watched as she turned to leave resolutely, never once looking back. He reached out in vain, grabbing nothing but the cold air around him. Ever since that day, Andrew entered a near-self, destructive mode of atonement. Ignoring the strong objections from Stone Group senior executives and the questioning from the board of directors, he insisted on putting Emily's studio in charge of a major and highly profitable project. He even offered terms so favorable that it almost seemed like he was giving the studio free money, despite knowing that this would incur a huge loss for the company. Mobilizing every means at his disposal, he quietly cleared obstacles that could hinder her career. He suppressed her competitors who tried to resort to underhanded business methods, smoothed things over for her at critical points, and delivered dream opportunities right up to her on a silver platter. However, he strictly forbade anyone from revealing any of his involvement in these things. He even started acting like an obsessive guardian, sending people to discreetly watch over her safety at all times. Once, on her way home from work, Emily was nearly struck by a bicycle whose rider had lost control of it. Andrew, who'd been following her at a distance, reacted instantly. Almost like a reflex, he rushed forward and shoved her aside. He ended up getting knocked down by the bicycle, his blood gushing from his elbows and knees that were scraped raw against the rough pavement. Emily had been in shock. When she realized it was Andrew who saved her, a mix of emotions flashed through her eyes, but they swiftly turned still once more. She came forward and asked in a polite but detached tone, "Are you all right, Mr. Stone? Shall I call an ambulance?" Fighting the pain, Andrew struggled to his feet before staring dazedly at Emily, mumbling, "I'm glad you're all right." Frowning slightly, she said curtly, "Thank you for pushing me out of harm's way just now, but you didn't have to do that. We're even now." Those last few words plunged Andrew into a bottomless abyss again. She would rather be hit by a bicycle than owe him any favors. In her eyes, all his sacrifices and attempts at making it up to her were probably nothing more than an unnecessary gesture, or perhaps even a burden. Andrew stood in place, watching her walk away without a hint of attachment. His wounds stung painfully, but it was nothing compared to the crushing despair in his heart. His life devolved into one of complete silence and inactivity. The villa had once been a symbol of power. It had witnessed all the ways he'd coldly hurt Emily. Now, it was akin to a luxurious mausoleum where his belated regret and unending loneliness were buried. Andrew no longer sought Emily out or no longer appeared at any place she might be. He even deliberately avoided any business event where their paths might cross. He became quiet and withdrawn. During company meetings, he would stare blankly out of the window for extended periods of time, making the senior executives hold their breath in restless unease. His once ruthless and decisive side was replaced by heavy weariness. Only Tyler knew that Andrew wasn't just spacing out. He was using an almost masochistic method of silently observing every detail of another person's life through the most discreet of channels. In the encrypted server of Andrew's study, there was a folder that contained the meticulously organized, publicly reported information about Emily, including her interviews and even every image regarding her products that had been released by her studio. He watched as her designs won international awards again and again. He looked on as her name started appearing more frequently in top design journals. Andrew witnessed how she dropped the humiliating label of being his ex-wife and gradually forged her own identity as the independent, respected designer, Emily Jameson. Chapter 18. Every time Andrew heard another piece of good news about Emily, the liquor cabinet in his study would open that night. He didn't need anyone to accompany him. Sitting alone in the dark, he would stare out at the city lights through the floor, 2 ceiling windows, pouring glass after glass of the strongest whiskey down his throat. When he saw the confident smile on Emily's face as she accepted the award, he would chuckle and smile along with her. Then, without warning, his tears would fall into his burning whiskey, the scorching feeling stinging both his throat and his heart. His emotions were a tangled mess. The pride he had for her achievements, the regret that had taken root in his bones, and the sense of irreplaceable loss would always devolve into an endless, icy sense of solitude. As if guarding an unspeakable secret, Andrew discreetly used his means to remove every obstacle in Emily's path. Once, a foolish competitor tried to sabotage Emily's fledgling studio with underhanded tactics. The next day, that company inexplicably found itself the target of a grave business compliance investigation. Someone had once secretly stolen Emily's spot at an international exhibition. But soon after that, the organization was put under intense pressure to restore her spot, a demand they couldn't refuse. Even when the family member of a core member of Emily's team had difficulties seeking medical treatment, the world's top medical expert just so happened to have an open appointment slot. Every intervention had been executed flawlessly, leaving no trace that Andrew was behind it. He no longer sought her gratitude. He even feared she might find out about his actions. This was merely his way of giving himself a reason to exist. It was his trivial, pitiful act of atonement. The years continued to pass, first one, then 2. One day, a detailed report landed on Andrew's desk. Apart from the information regarding the latest milestone in Emily's career, there was also a candid photo of her standing side by side with a refined-looking young gentleman. They were inside a bookstore, reading from the same book with relaxed smiles on their faces. The man's eyes rested on her face with open admiration and respect. According to the report, this was Spencer Hudson, a renowned architect who just returned to the country. He came from an illustrious family and was accomplished in his own right. Moreover, he and Emily shared a lot of similarities in their professional careers and design philosophy. More importantly, he had been her childhood schoolmate who'd interacted with her on multiple occasions. It wouldn't be wrong to call him an old acquaintance. Recently, they'd reconnected through a cross-disciplinary project and started spending more time together. Emily didn't seem to reject his attempt to get closer to her. "Spencer Hudson," Andrew mumbled, his fingers cold. The harmonious atmosphere in the photo stung him like a needle, stabbing right in the most tender spot of his heart. Andrew had Emily by his side for 5 years, but not once had he ever shared such a peaceful and warm moment with her. A surge of instinctive jealousy and possessiveness overwhelmed him. He almost gave the order to use every means necessary to drive Spencer out of his sight, and out of Emily's life completely, just like how he'd easily removed every obstacle in his path before. But at the very next second, Emily's calm, pitying gaze appeared in his mind. Her words echoed in his head. "Things between us ended for good long ago." What right did he have to interfere? On what grounds could he act in such a manner? As the agony swept through him, he clenched his fists, his nails digging into his palms and drawing blood. He tried to use the physical pain to drown out the torment of jealousy that churned within him, as well as his reluctance to accept reality. Andrew locked himself in the study for an entire day and night. The floor was covered in empty liquor bottles and the crumpled balls of paper he'd ripped apart. Just as the sky slowly began to lighten, he hauled up his exhausted body and called Peter, saying hoarsely, "Look into Spencer Hudson and his family's company. See if they've encountered any trouble recently. Don't let anyone know about this." Peter came back, with the results of the investigation in no time. A major project the Hudsons were involved with abroad was currently in a deadlock due to the sudden changes in local government policies. The company's funding was stretched thin, and Spencer seemed to be traveling in and out of the country frequently in an attempt to sort out this matter. Staring at the report, Andrew remained silent for a very long time. In the end, he made a decision that came as a shock to himself as well. Instead of adding more pressure onto the Hudson family, he used a discreet international connection he had and provided the project with critical funding through a third-party investor. He made sure it was a completely logical business move that wouldn't arouse any suspicion. He also smoothed things over with the local government, quietly resolving the crisis for the Hudsons. Throughout this entire process, he made sure nothing could be traced back to him. The Hudsons would simply think they were fortunate to have found an investor willing to lend them a hand in their hour of need. Afterward, Andrew stood on the balcony of the empty villa, watching as the first light of dawn rose on the distant horizon. A part of his heart seemed to have died out completely, but at the same time, an odd, painfully serene calm spread through him. It finally hit him. When a person loved another to the fullest, the love didn't come in the form of selfish possession, but the grace of letting them go. It meant wishing her happiness, even if the happiness had nothing to do with him, even if the source of said happiness was another man. Andrew had destroyed any right he had to be with Emily. All he could do now was ensure that the man who could remain by her side was good enough for her. He had to be good enough to give her all the love, respect, and protection Andrew never gave her. This final act of stepping aside to ensure Emily's happiness was the only thing he could give her. It was also the final and cruelest form of punishment he delivered to himself. A few days later, Andrew called a company board meeting to make a solemn announcement. He would gradually step down as CEO, retaining only the chairman title. The company's daily operations would be handed over to the professional management team he had cultivated over the years. As for him, he would be settling abroad for an extended period. He wanted to focus on the philanthropic work involving the global environmental and educational foundations he'd anonymously set up in the past. When the news came out, it sent shockwaves through the world. No one could understand why he was making such a hurried retreat from the limelight when he was at the height of his career. After completing the handover, Andrew left without saying goodbye to anyone. Before leaving, he went alone to the villa that was filled with the memories of endless hurt and just the tiniest flicker of warmth. He took one last look around before leaving without any further sense of attachment. As the plane climbed through the clouds, he watched the city below slowly shrinking from view. He knew that this time, he was truly leaving Emily's world for good. Chapter 23. Andrea paused, instantly putting away her smile. Are you really short on money? Why? She remembered the family that adopted Zachary was very wealthy, a kind of wealth she had never been close to. There was no reason for him to be short on money. Zachary sighed, saying nothing. He just smiled at her. Yes, I need money, so can a prophet foresee the winning lottery? Numbers. Seeing that he didn't want to talk about it, Andrea also put away her curiosity. There was no need to dig too deep into things. Lottery numbers are all man-made, don't you know that? After she finished speaking, Andrea's eyes suddenly lit up. But we can bet on the games. The outcome of the matches wouldn't change just because she was reborn. Although she didn't watch sports, she remembered not only the winners and losers of those few shocking matches, but also the scores. That was enough to make a fortune. Besides, this year was 2018. The World Cup was happening this year. Andrea excitedly patted Zachary on the shoulder. Zachary, we're about to achieve financial freedom. Zachary rubbed his shoulder where she had hit him, looking at her excited face, and lowered his eyes with a smile. We. Andrea said excitedly, yes, us. As soon as she spoke, she suddenly stopped. Us, when did she start tying herself together with Zachary? She looked up in surprise, gazing into Zachary's eyes. For some reason, An image flashed through her mind. He was holding her in his arms, his cold hands trembling as he gripped hers. Again and again, a trembling, fearful voice called out in her ear. "Don't die, don't die." It seemed as if his world had suddenly collapsed along with her death. Those eyes that always held a smile were now filled with tears. Andrea's chest suddenly felt blocked, and she reached out to clutch her heart. There the pain was almost shattering, a sour ache filling her entire chest. Zachary never liked to see her upset, so he quickly smiled and changed the subject. "Almost forgot, Damon will be coming here in a few days. He's very interested in your paintings, but there's another artist who also wants to submit work, so you need to finish your painting quickly." When Andrea heard this, all her emotions instantly disappeared. "Why didn't you tell me earlier? I have to work overtime these days." She hurried back to the studio to rush her work. Zachary watched her back and couldn't help but smile. A few days later, the wife of the chairman of Langford Enterprises reported him under her real name. The chairman was arrested, and overnight, all the stocks plummeted. Countless shareholders wailed in despair. How could this happen? Alexander stared at the sea of green on his phone screen, nearly grinding his teeth to pieces. This was his last bit of capital. Now he truly had no backup plan. Even though he was always calm and composed, faced with this situation, he couldn't help but break down. After a long time, he took a deep breath and called Dorothy. The phone rang a few times before being hung up. He gripped his phone tightly and called her brother instead. "Stop calling me. I can't help you either." Alexander said in a low voice, "I want to see Dorothy. Give her the phone." The man looked awkwardly at Dorothy, who was calmly playing with a dog nearby. "My sister has made it very clear. Deal with your family first, then come to her." Alexander fell silent, and after a moment, Dorothy took the phone. "Alexander, I've run out of patience. Next, I'll solve the problem my own way." The next day, after meeting with Damon and discussing the details of their collaboration, Andrea returned to her studio in a good mood. As soon as she entered, she saw Olivia walking over with a troubled expression. Andrea frowned slightly. "What's wrong?" Olivia glanced at her awkwardly and held her phone screen up to Andrea's face. "Drea, look." Andrea glanced at the screen, and in an instant, all the blood in her body seemed to freeze. A glaring headline was trending at the top of the search list. Damon's collaboration with a streetwalker. Chapter 24. In the entry, there was a photo of her and Damon discussing cooperation. Below it lay all her background, disgraceful and unbearable to look at. The comment section was equally condescending. "I never thought much of this art exhibition, traveling thousands of miles to our country just for a painting. Impossible. It must be for someone. How old is Damon now? And this woman still goes after him. So disgusting. Is this the world of you artists?" Andrea read through each comment, her hand trembling as she held her phone. It was happening again, just like before. Her background was exposed, followed by endless humiliation. She could no longer go outside. Every time she did, she would be the subject of all kinds of gossip. Every vile word would be attached to her. A chill crept inch by inch into her heart, draining all color from her face. Olivia saw her pallor and quickly put away her phone. "Drea, I absolutely believe in you. You're not that kind of person." She hurried to say something comforting, but Andrea just let out a soft laugh. Her gaze vacant, she walked toward the studio. Does it even matter what kind of person I am anymore? No one would listen to her explanation, and no one cared about the truth. Olivia watched her retreating figure, anxiously calling Zachary, but no one ever answered. "Pick up, please, Zachary. Only you can save Drea now." On the other side, at the Prestons' residence. "Are you sure it's okay not to answer the phone?" Dorothy gently stroked the Samoyed's head. Zachary glanced at the vibrating phone on the table and casually turned it off. His gaze was indifferent, and his voice was just as cold. "Dorothy, I told you not to touch her." Dorothy looked up at him. "Cousin, you must be mistaken. It was the netizens who went after her, not me." Zachary said coldly, "I remember you have a plot of land in the north of the city. You must have invested all your money there, right?" Dorothy's expression changed. Zachary continued, "If your own dog keeps running outside, just keep it at home. Don't make things difficult for innocent passers-by. If I still see any discussion about this online within 3 hours, you won't want to know the consequences." With that, he stood up decisively and walked out. Dorothy gritted her teeth as she watched his back. The butler said, Mr. Wilkinson is here." "Alexander," Dorothy snorted coldly, "I won't see him. I can't control the passers-by, but can I control a dog? A disobedient dog, I don't want it anymore. Let it fend for itself." The studio. Andrea sat in the corner, all the curtains drawn. There was no light, no lamp. She hugged herself tightly, curling into a ball. Endless panic nearly pushed her sanity into the darkness. When she closed her eyes, all she could see was her father coming home covered in blood. Police cars stopped downstairs, sirens blaring. And under the red and blue lights, all the neighbors looked at her with strange eyes. She wanted to escape those stares, those discussions. She tried desperately to hide behind her mother, but her mother pulled her out and made her drink with some drunken guests. She sat in the living room, listening to the sounds of heavy breathing coming from the room. It was her mother, with an unknown man. She kept her eyes tightly shut, but tears streamed down her face. Endless darkness swallowed her whole. Suddenly, there was a soft sound of the door opening. A beam of light slipped through the crack, falling onto her face. Someone walked toward her, each step heavy. Those cold hands gently cupped her face, as if handling the world's most precious jewel, wiping away her tears. "Andrea, don't be afraid." He always said that. Andrea's heart sank, and bitter tears fell heavily. She kept her eyes tightly shut, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Zachary, am I disgusting?" Pain flickered in Zachary's eyes. "Andrea, that's not true. It's all just an illusion." "Open your eyes. I'm the only one in front of you." Andrea slowly opened her eyes, her vision blurred. She saw her own reflection in Zachary's eyes. And only her reflection. Chapter 25. Those eyes seemed familiar, as if she had seen them somewhere before. On a rainy night, on a drunken evening, her mind had been just as clouded. Back then, she gazed into those eyes, kissed his lips, pressed him onto the bed, and unbuttoned his shirt. She gently bit the side of his neck and heard a gasp of unbearable desire. That gasp was so familiar, so very familiar, it sounded just like Zachary. But that couldn't be right. The only person she could do such things with was Alexander, so she called his name. "Alexander." The person beneath her instantly stiffened. With a loud bang, the door was flung open. Alexander stood outside, coldly watching everything inside. Andrea suddenly pushed Zachary away, her shock beyond belief. "That night it was you." She had mistaken the person, so Zachary left, and that was why Alexander thought she had cheated on him. Zachary looked at his now empty hands, his gaze pausing. "You remember everything now." Andrea covered her lips, looking at Zachary through tears. Why? Why would she forget even something so important? I'm sorry." "Sorry." Zachary looked at her quietly, a bitter smile suddenly appearing. "Is that all you have to say? Just sorry?" A stabbing pain twisted in Andrea's chest. She squeezed her eyes shut, not daring to meet Zachary's gaze. Zachary let out a long sigh. "It's pointless to dwell on all this. Your problem has been resolved. I've already arranged for someone to clear things up." He glanced at Andrea, who was trembling uncontrollably, and his eyes dimmed. "I said I would always stand behind you, but if you don't want to see me, I won't appear before you." His voice was so soft, it was almost ethereal. Andrea's chest twisted with intense pain. She suddenly opened her eyes, only to find that the doorway was already empty. Only the white window curtains fluttered in the air. This time, the incident did not spread as it had in her previous life. It was suppressed almost instantly, and soon those marketing accounts apologized. Even if several people came forward to confirm it was true, it would be immediately silenced. A few days later, Dorothy, the heiress of the Preston Group, officially announced her relationship with her young boyfriend, who was working as a male model, and that completely overshadowed all public opinion. This young boyfriend was not Alexander. Everyone knew he had been utterly abandoned, and no one ever saw him again. Andrea and Damon's art exhibition went very smoothly. After drinking the celebratory wine, on her way home, she saw several familiar people chasing after debts. The person running ahead of them was Alexander. She hesitated for a moment, then followed. She saw Alexander escape into a narrow alley, evading the debt collectors, and then head further down. In the dim surroundings, Alexander's clothes were tattered, his face bore some injuries. Rebecca was coughing, Bridget was crying. Despair filled the entire home. Andrea watched for a moment, sighed, and placed a few $100s in cash at the doorway. As she left, she accidentally bumped into an empty soda can on the ground. Alexander cautiously walked to the door, only to see several $100 bills lying on the ground. His hands at his sides suddenly clenched into fists. Staring into the dark night, his eyes were full of unwillingness. The end. And that's a wrap on today's reading here at Booked for Drama. If you felt anything, rage, swoon, secondhand heartbreak, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow drama lovers. If you have any requests, drop them in the comments. Until next time, keep reading and keep the drama on the page.